So, what to do about Sam? I feel like Sam's a harder character to talk about than Dean and Cass in relation to the supernatural discourse, despite the fact that he's one of the main characters, if not the supposedly original main character in this Star Wars meets the American Midwest dramatic adventure series. Now, why is that? Could it be that just over time, Sam's character was phased out more and more as Dean got more attention due to his stronger relationship to the Heaven plots of season 4, 5, and 6? Is it the micro-expressions arms race that Jensen and Jared are having with each other? Is it just in character for a show like Supernatural that's just a breeze away from falling apart like a deck of cards to forget that it has an entire protagonist it could be working with? Who's to say? Season by season, Sam grows to lack any agency within the plot as Dean gets the mark of Cain, gets the strongest relationship with Amara, something season 12. But what if this was somewhat intentional? I propose this idea, not to excuse the Supernatural writers, because, come on. Seriously? Dean only went to hell because of the 2007-2008 writer strikes. And although I can commend them for working on the fly, so to speak, this is not the kind of long game con they'd pull. I'm also not doing this to insult the Sam people I've grown to follow online, who have honestly gotten me to think more about the character in the context of a story that clearly doesn't value him as much as the audience does. What if Sam's character arc was about how little agency he had in this world, and his constant fight to maintain control over his life, body, and mind? Sometimes in big ways, but sometimes in small ways as well, in relation to the show's later and more present theme of free will. Season 1 supports this idea a lot, as Sam, not wanting to be a hunter like his father and brother, leaves for college to take control of his life. At the age of 18, at Stanford, taking pre-law. This is notable to point out as, at Nephilium Jack, I hope I'm saying that right, on Tumblr, points out something that I could have very easily Googled, but pre-law technically isn't a major, just the intention of going to law school, and that you can major in basically anything from there. And although the intention is there to build those walls between his hunter origins, it's almost like he's expecting to be pulled back in. Especially since it's mentioned in the pilot that Sam's been away for 4 or so years, but hasn't seen Dean in 2. It's always a good idea to start at the beginning, but it isn't just about the beginning. It's about both the agency involved and the inevitability. Going to college is the usual big step a kid is supposed to take in order to get their life together, but he's effectively undecided when it comes to what he's really doing there. That's not a slight to him or people who don't have their entire lives planned out at the age of 10, but it does imply on some level that the control is both something that he's wanted his entire life, but also something inherently suffocating. I don't know, I might be reading into that too much, honestly. Season 2 features him and his latent demon blood powers. Something that he should have the right to explore on his own, but something everybody in his life has opinions on. From John saying that he should die over this, to Dean just flat out not trusting them in the slightest, to literally every monster they face saying that he should totally use those powers. The demon powers give him something wholly his own, nobody else's, and yet literally everybody is telling him what to do with them. I can't deny that there are some clear and obvious red flags on this slippery slope into bad things to come, but you can't deny the guy the right to grab a sled, right? I mean, come on. Season 3 is more Dean's arc, and about him going to hell and trying to stop him from going to hell and all that. But he's only going to hell because he traded his life for Sam's, which is something that Sam would just not have asked him to do, or even wanted him to do in the first place. I mean, I know that most people don't want to die at 23, but the idea that somebody died, or is going to die, not because of something you said or did or were, but for you, because of you, for the sake of you? I couldn't even imagine what that would feel like. The implicit blood on your hands that you never asked for. That's insane. Nobody could feel good about that scenario. But let's talk about Dean in relation to this while we're here. It could be said that Dean is the one denying Sam his agency in the first place. forcing him to get back into hunting when he didn't really want to, being overly wary of Sam's powers, and various other bad decisions made throughout the series that, just because he had good intentions in mind, doesn't make anything he does excusable, but I don't know. There's no way to shake this relationship out in a way that reads as good a lot of the time. They're toxically codependent, with neither of them really having power over the other. Maybe when they were little kids, things were a little different, but trying to suss that out now is still hard. However, to say that Sam could have just left at any interval he pleased is still kind of disrespectful to those in these kind of weird, controlling relationships right now and are struggling to leave. But the thing is, we've actually seen him have the opportunity to leave. And what he does with it. In Season 4, we see that in the 6 months Dean has spent dead and in hell, Sam's remained immersed in the world of the supernatural. Sure, that might not really be a choice. My guilt would be immeasurable in such a scenario, and he did promise Dean he'd keep fighting, but the key difference here is that he's been able to dabble with the paranormal on his own terms. For instance, regularly hanging out with demons like Ruby, using his powers, getting addicted to illegal substances, etc., etc. Not exactly his fault that in the time he had to regain his agency, he just ran into the arms of somebody else looking to control him, but it happens. I'll admit that I kind of gloss over a large part of Sam and Dean's relationship to lead into more of the season rundown, but to make it clear, to highlight Dean and Sam's relationship as simply the protector and the protected, or father and son, or something of that ilk, is really reductive for both characters. They don't always walk into a room with the same amount of knowledge or power, but the playing field always evens out eventually. And if that playing field is evened out by the forces that be, given their scenarios, then so be it. But I think on some level, Dean's first priority is still at all times to protect Sam. And that complicates things. Despite the fact that he's also a 40-year-old monster hunter who has the ability to protect himself, and even the right to decide that he doesn't want to be saved, he doesn't really have a say in the matter. Whereas Sam doesn't have that same priority scrawled into his brain as the golden child in their weird family relationship, but I'm sure he cares about Dean just as much. It just manifests differently. Dean never really got to have autonomy or be himself, not some Frankenstein of personality traits he mixed and matched with his father or a blunt weapon, but his own person who got to live and grow the way Sam did. Even in those unfavorable circumstances, Sam gets to have those boundaries while Dean sees the idea of the self as an insult to the concept of family. TLDR, because this is getting kind of weird and rambly, and I just wanted to provide you guys with some greater context and my feelings on this scenario. Their relationship is inherently complex, especially given their long history and the different kinds of roles they've been forced to play within each other's lives. I don't think Dean is actively trying to control Sam's life, but if Sam were to ever feel like he was, then he'd be right to feel that way, and it wouldn't really be anybody's fault. Anyhow, on to Season 5, so this doesn't last a million more years than anybody wants it to. Season 5 delves more into Sam's relationship with demon blood, as sort of an allegory for addiction, but also a literal addiction that could kill him from the inside out. So you know, literal, allegory, metaphor. Not to hammer on about the point of the video, but a lot of people get into various kinds of addictions like smoking, drugs, shopping, not just to relieve stress, but to feel like they have control over their lives. Imagine that you had just learned that every event in your life was planned to the letter, down to mashing your parents together in an alright relationship just so you and your brother could be born and eventually doom the world. Everything from the worst things that you have ever experienced to the very best. You're telling me you wouldn't try to get a little high about it? As mentioned in my last video on Distill, nobody in Supernatural understands mental health very well. From mildly suicidal intent and low self-esteem to addiction counseling, because half these men are alcoholics as is. And because of this, I'm sure Sam had a way harder time kicking the demon blood addiction than he would under normal circumstances. what with all the scrutiny and mistrust being levied his way. Being locked in a literal panic room probably doesn't help either. But hey, what do I, a person who tries to turn every therapy session into a stand-up comedy routine, know? Season 6, Sam's supposed to be the vessel for Satan. This kind of writes itself. Possession is literally about taking control away from the person who inhabits the body and giving it to another. This kid is going through so much, and he's got to be like 30 at least. God. Season 7.
Knock knock, get the door. It's
Still Satan, just out there, putting Sam through another mental health crisis. You know, as he's actively hallucinating and self-harming now.
You know that he's not real, right?
Even if Sam isn't in danger of losing his entire body to Satan, even if Sam isn't in danger of losing his entire body to Lucifer, he still isn't in a place where he can deny his influence or grasp that he has something on him. He's still within the control of another, in ways that are both big and small, and this is something he's struggling to break away from, as at the best of times those around him minimize his struggles, and at worst they outright villainize him for it. I know I could analyze the relationship so much deeper than I currently am, but it's Satan. Not even an inherently complex Satan. This is shitty, rebellious teen son Satan.
If Dad has something to say to me, I'll hear it from him. Until then, I'll be in my room.
It's not your room, it's my room.
And that's the end of the season rundown. It's honestly harder to analyze Sam beyond season 7. I mean, partially because I have made it very clear that I'm kind of blind in that area, but also because Sam doesn't really get many strong character moments or arcs. Even this way in the series is kind of pushing it, and that's kind of sad because I feel like he had so much character in the beginning. He was snarky but kind and highly empathetic in ways that Dean couldn't be due to never having the chance to engage in society as a normal person who didn't know what was really out there. He felt like he had so much personality, but now he's the smart guy, I guess.
God, this is really bad acting. Let me go from the top.
Wait, that's never stopped you before.
But just think of all the stuff that's happened to him. Everything that he's never had a say in. From being born with demon blood and destined to be Lucifer's true host body to being thrown back into hunting and having his brother die for him 100 times over. To things like addiction and possession that take away the illusion of control entirely. I don't think Dean has that same arc of being tossed around in the narrative like a boat in unstable waters because Dean is given different treatment than Sam is, and is allowed to take more narrative control over his destiny, because the narrative gives him no other option. He decides to drag Sam back into hunting because he can't really turn to anybody else, and the show wouldn't exist without that event. He decides to take the deal and save Sam's life because John made it so that he couldn't even comprehend living in a world without him. He confronts the thing that saved him from hell and convinces him that they are the true good side in this fight because the only other option would be to let the whole world die. He gets to confront the darkness. He gets the mark of Cain. He gets to choose. Sam doesn't. I don't know why this narrative is the way it is, and I doubt that it's on purpose. But God, imagine if it was. There's something so compelling about the narrative between the one who's never had a choice in so many aspects of his life, and the one who's had to convince himself that the only choice available is the best one, finally getting free will, and a chance to get a choice, be able to see that there are other options out there. Better options. A better ending for the both of them. A better ending they get to choose. I think it could really be something, is the thing. I mean, I have my doubts, obviously, about how intentional this is, but even outside of my season's observations, taken from afar, this emphasis over how little / how much Sam can and wants to control his own life, even in the smallest of details that I have doubts that the showrunners thought about for more than 5 seconds, is just really something. Like, how Sam's technically the more actively healthier sibling. Going out jogging and getting dunked on for eating vegetables. I mean, this could just be Dean's fatalistic nature of, well, if I'm gonna get killed by some shadow demon from the netherworld anyhow, Why shouldn't I eat this bacon cheeseburger? But it could be Sam's way of taking his body back from those who want to use it, both in the way that the hunter lifestyle wants him to use his body as a blunt weapon with a clear and obvious expiration date, i.e., not something worth being maintained for longevity, and as a way to clean himself of any perceived impurities that might come from being so heavily associated with being tainted all his life. In regards to the demon blood and being Lucifer's chosen vessel, or just a general trauma of being a teenager and knowing that there are bad things out there, but nothing as bad as you. In as many ways as you're not, you're devout. You're good, but you're not. And you might never be good. But you get out. You get to pretend to be good, and that you've always been good, and nothing worthwhile has singed your mortal soul. You pray every day, and you truly believe, because there has to be something good in this world that you only see the brutal underbelly of. And your first true encounter with something close to this holiness, this godliness that you've been stretching out to reach for your entire life, calls you a blood freak.
Oh my God. I didn't mean to, sorry. It's an honor. Really, I've heard a lot about you.
And I, you. Sam Winchester, the boy with the demon blood.
I don't know. I might cry. Depends on how hard the Catholic guilt's really hitting that day. Like, I doubt that the writers really thought about it that hard. They probably just wanted to make fun of a man eating a salad, but as the Filia's Opinions motto apparently goes, it could be that deep, and it should. If your theme is free will, along with the badass line of, my show is about family, and family is hell, do not expect it to be worked more into the text. This is me going full English teacher saying that the blue curtains represented the inherent melancholy of man, and maybe it shouldn't be that deep. But isn't it? Couldn't it be? Whatever. Textual readings be damned and all that. I find this reading makes the show more interesting. The same way that Catherine the Rye is way more interesting if one reads Holden Caulfield as a repressed gay man. A reading like this is supposed to enrich the text given, not something you're supposed to beat the writers to death over for not conforming to. And besides, there are way better things to beat the writers over the head for, like Dean Winchester being a Trump supporter. Eric, are you kidding? With the show's theme inherently being free will, freeing yourself from the shackles of those who want to control and abuse you, and a narrative path of having it, gaining it, losing it, and gaining it again, Sam, at the very least in this scenario, exemplifies it incredibly well. The only thing about it is, it's kind of sad. Sam never really gets what he wants. From the start of the series, all Sam has really wanted was a normal, white picket fence life with a girlfriend, and not a hair's whisper of anything resembling his family legacy of monster hunting. And he doesn't get that. Although we've been given examples before on how bad the Winchesters are at being normal people, living normal lives, It's a Terrible Life, for instance, is a great example of this, but I think that could just be how normal, unfulfilling suburbia is, if I'm being honest. But at least you'd have a choice in it. And doesn't that make all the difference? Is hunting fulfilling? Is that a question you even ask when you aren't about to be shanked by demon number 2 off screen? Is it more fulfilling when you have a choice in what you're doing? Who's to say? At least Sam finally got what he wanted. The finale was a win for all of us, Sam. Okay, I can't even pretend that this was a good ending for anybody. Not even as a joke. Finally out beneath the thumb of everybody who's ever had a say in how he lives his life, and he decides to do the same thing he wanted to do 15 years ago with no character growth whatsoever. Love that for him. Love it. It's awful. I hate it. He isn't even a lawyer. He doesn't even get his badass deaf hunter girlfriend back. Whatever. Literally every single one of these characters is so much more interesting than a narrative allows them to be, and that's that on that. So, I suppose that was the video. I hope you enjoyed it. All because after I made that Disteel video, I got way back into the sauce of Supernatural, and may I just say, I am having a great time. Like, God, I wish I could focus on better things. I promise I have good interests too. But you know, this is fun. This is some super fun garbage. I'm going to talk about a bunch of stuff regarding the last video and general end card kind of things, so if you just wanted to hear about Sam, you can jump off now. But if you want to stick around, be my guest. Thanks. Also, thank you to everybody who commented on that last video as well. I'll put some of my favorite comments on screen in a second. I was thinking about making another video like the Steel one, which turned out to be this, but what really got me motivated was seeing so many of you in the comments talking about what I said and giving me your own thoughts on the theories, and that's just, wow, the dopamine, you know? If there's anything you'd want to see me talk about in another video, feel free to comment it down below, and if you have anything to say about this video, please say it. I love hearing your thoughts. Ellie Simon ended up asking me a question in the last video, which is, do I think that the story that came up for the Steel could have happened in season 15? I'm thinking, maybe. My original idea was for Castiel to become an outlet for Dean outside of hunting, and if Cass couldn't hunt it anymore, or didn't want to, or just trying to encourage Dean to move away from it around the same time they realized they could have this happily ever after if they just flat out killed God, then I think that could be narratively satisfying. The character that was never meant to stick around being the reason for the author's darling to remove the influence of the author from the narrative. It's compelling. I just personally prefer to be able to get into the weeds of season 4 and 5, but then again, who wouldn't? However, I'd say yes because if any of you were able to get me onto the CW, I'd be arrogant enough to try even this late in the game. The show's over? I'll get us the cottagecore ending we deserve in season 16. Just you wait.
Get you strawberry blonde, fields rolling on. I love it when you call my name. Can you hear the bumblebee swarm watching your arm? I love it when you look my way.
Also, just wanted to respond to this in the video because I think it's good to do so after everything that's happened and the finale and season 16's wild ride, but I really don't blame Jensen or Misha for how this scene turned out, considering it's been revealed that there are 5 extra minutes that got cut from the final episode. It sounds like the CW may have had a hand to play in all this. Please don't blame any of the actors for the way 15/18 or the finale turned out. I understand that they're way more available than any network could be, but that's like getting mad at your grocery store clerk for the way the chain does things. I understand that I might have added some of that fuel to the fire with my stupid jokes, and well, I apologize. Please, feel free to subscribe. There'll be more opportunities to come from me to continue to spew random bullshit. Not about Supernatural next time, but maybe next time. Who's to say? I am very excited. Goodbye for now, I suppose.